Hi, welcome back to Spirit Lounge. I hope you guys are doing really well, and to the next chapter 4 of the Brhad-Aranyaka Upanisad, which is one of, I think, 3 in the Upanisads. So we're going to crack straight onto this, and it continues a kind of conversational with the seer. It continues a conversation with different people, as you'll see, and it touches on different topics. So we'll get straight into this and see how we get on. So, okay, here we go. So, the Brhad-Aranyaka Upanishad this is chapter 4 of the continuation of that. Again, the Vedas were 700 to 400 BCE by various seers and ascetics that went into the forest or went off in meditative practice, forests, caves, mountaintops, hidden away, and then pulled together these perceptions that they received. It's not saying that anything's right or wrong. It is a combination of perceptions and what these individuals were receiving in terms of their connection or what they deemed connection to grace or source or the divine or the Godhead. The Brhad-Aranyaka was supposed to be the most important of them all. It contains 3 teachings, and they are those of hearing the Upanishad, which is opening yourself up to receiving it, and then the manana, which is a reflection of it, and then the contemplative meditation is what they would call receding oneself into higher forms of meditative contemplation practice, and soaring oneself towards source, which is what these 3 stages are. Okay, so this one, the first Brahmana, is the inadequate definitions of Brahman. Remember, Brahman is the supreme consciousness. It's the absolute, is the divine Godhead, and the Brahman is the consciousness. So we'll go into this, and this is where Yajnavalkya talks to a king. This time in a conversation piece throughout this entire chapter. And then at the very end, spoiler, he then recedes off into the forest after leaving his 2 wives taken care of, and then he recedes into his forest to basically start what we would call a deeper, this doesn't seem to change when I ask it to change. It's very, very slow for some unforeseen reason. It's the upapatti, so he's going off into his what we'd call deep contemplative meditation in the forest. Okay. Janaka, king of Videha, was seated. Yajnavalkya came up and Janaka said, "What purpose have you come? Have you asked, have you come for cattle, or have you come for questions?" Yajnavalkya said, "Both." So remember, the offering in those times is that for wisdom, knowledge, assistance in the ascent, or cattle and gold coins were offered. These are the kind of things that were offered to seers, ascetics, and so forth. And he says, "Let me hear what any," and so Yajnavalkya says, "Let me hear what any of your teachers have told you." This is about ascension. Janaka, the king, says, "Jitvan," which is one of the teachers that he has access to, "told me that speech is Brahman. What can one have who cannot speak? Did he tell you the abode," and then the question is asked, "Did he tell you the abode and support of that Brahman?" "No, he did not. This Brahman is one-footed," so he's basically, Yajnavalkya is saying it's one-footed, it's just one branch of a much wider piece of knowing. And then he goes on to ask, "Oh, its abode is speech, its support is space, and worship. You worship it as intelligence by speech, a friend is recognized by speech alone, either Rig Veda, Yaya, Samur, Atharva Veda, and commentary sacrifices, food and drink, world, all beings are known, the higher Brahman. In truth, speech does not desert him. Having become a god, he goes even to the gods. Yanaka said, I shall give you 1,000 cows, a bull. One should not accept gifts without having been instructed. And this passage is repeated in format, so it goes on and on and on, saying that speech is one-footed, mind is one-footed, hearing is one-footed, and so on and so forth. It goes on and on this way. What it's just, remember, these are metaphors for aspects of divine ascent. So speech is to think, mind is to absorb intelligence, and so on and so forth. Okay, pranya is Sanskrit for intelligence. Vak is logos, and wisdom is that which sets us free. Vijnana is discriminative thought, i.e. discernment, contemplative thought, and meditative contemplation as well. Okay, and then another teacher told Vanaka, Udanka, which is another teacher, told me that the vital breath, which is also known as the spirit as well as the breath, which is the prana of life, says that the vital breath is also Brahman. Yanavalkya says, did he tell you the abode and the support of for Brahman? No, he did not. And again, this Brahma is only one-footed. Again, Yanavalkya said it's just one aspect. The vital breath itself is out of the love of life. So the prana gives life. One offers sacrifices for him for whom they should not be accepted. Out of just love of life, there arises fear of being in whatever direction one goes. Life is in truth the highest Brahman. So this is Brahman, the breath of life, the spirit that sustains and animates life, also, and the love of that through the giving of life. Okay, and another teacher says, Baku told me that the eye is Brahman, the abode and the support. And then he again is asked, did he tell you what was the abode and the support? And he says, this Brahma is yet again one-footed because it's just one aspect. And Yanavalkya goes on to say, the eye is its abode and space, its support. One should worship truth. I is the highest Brahman. Now, he's not talking about the just this physical eye. So what is seen with the eye, this is a note in the book, what is seen with the eye is regarded as more authoritative than what is perceived by other senses. So it is said to be true. It's also the internal eye, the third eye, I would suspect was also what this is referring to. Oh, another one of the teachers, Gadba Bivipita, I probably haven't said that one correctly, told me that the ear is Brahman, and the ear is its abode and space its support. One should worship it as endless. The quarters themselves, to what quarters one goes, he does not come to the end of it, for the quarters are endless. The quarters are known as space. Quarters are the ear, is the highest Brahman. Okay, in Satyakama, another one of the teachers says to Yanaka, he told me that the mind is Brahman. And then Yanavalkya says, for what can one have, one who is without a mind? Mind is its abode. Worship it as the blissful. By the mind one takes a woman, a son. He is the source of bliss. Many, many metaphors. Again, it continues on from chapter to chapter. You'll see that the same metaphorical narrative to describe that everything is a formation of the one, an expression of the one, can be accessed from the one because it is all of source, a manifestation of source. So it goes on, every chapter seems to go on through the same almost repeating conversation with different, with Yanavalkya in this particular series of chapters with different people, but the conversation is exactly the same. The chapters are very, very similar in nature. In about half of the content of each chapter is very similar. It's all the same. And okay, Vidaga, and another one of the teachers of Vanaka, said, he told me that the heart is Brahman. Yanavalkya goes on to say, what can one have who is without a heart? One-footed is this. Again, it's one aspect. Worship it as the stable, i.e. the stable is the heart. It is the abode of all things, and the heart is the support of all beings. The heart is the supreme Brahman. The heart is also the partner of the spirit. The spirit resides within the heart space, as this will go on to say. Okay, we continue. Second Brahman is concerning the soul. So just have a little cup of tea. Okay, Yanaka came down from his lounge and said to Yanavalkya, "Please instruct me." Yanavalkya said, that one who wishes to go a long distance must secure a chariot or a ship. Your mind is well equipped with the teachings of the Upanishads. You have studied the Vedas and heard the Upanishads. Where will you go when you are released from this body? I shall tell you. So Yanaka is basically asking for more and more knowledge from Yanavalkya. He's asking for all the teachings to be purveyed upon him by Yanavalkya. Yanavalkya is asking, where will you go once you've released all this and you've understood the Upanishads and their fullness, and then therefore you reach what's that state of moksha, and therefore you release from the body. So it's saying, this is another note, the theoretical knowledge of the Vedas and the Upanishads is not enough, for it does not remove fear, it requires knowledge of self, of Brahman. Absolutely, this goes not just for the Vedas, not just for the Gnostic texts, it goes for any scripture, any knowledge, any non-scriptorial knowledge that we receive from ourselves needs to be absorbed and processed through the spirit and the heart space. It comes from here and it's received and understood from our conscious selves through the mind. This Trinity is how we understand it. We cannot absorb and know the divine through only absorb of intellectual, theoretical knowledge of things. To study something mentally will not give it. You must read it, so absorb it mentally, but it's felt and understood through the heart and the spirit space here. This is what this is saying. Inda, another teacher, said, this person who is in the right eye, indirectly. Inda is a person. This person who is in the right eye, indirectly. For the gods are fond of the indirect. They dislike the direct or the evident. Form of a person in the left eye is his wife Viraj. And so what does it mean by indirect? Direct means something that is intellectually understood, something that is apparent, material matter. Indirect is that which is received. So what it's saying in the person with the right eye, for the gods are fond of the indirect, that which is received from the heart and spirit space. Okay, form of a person in the left eye is his wife Viraj. Place of union is the space within the heart. And then it goes on to describe aspects of the heart. Red of blood lump in the heart. It's the paths and the channels which go upward from the heart. So he's talking about the blood vessels, the arteries, the heart itself, the encasing of the heart. Through these flows that which flows on. Right, he's talking about spiritual energy, love, grace and light. Light being information, source information. The subtle body is nourished by finer food than the gross. The finer food than the gross. The gross is that which we eat through the mouth. The finer food is that which we absorb from energy, from the ether, from our connection to grace and source itself, and process that. In dream state, the self is identified with the subtle body. So what this is going on to say now is that in dream state, our material, physical, external senses are at rest, and what then we are more attached to our spiritual selves, our energetic bodies. Remember the various bodies that can exist, the auric body, our energy body, our etheric body, our chakra bodies. Those are still active, and then we are attached to those closer when our consciousness moves into those when we're asleep. Okay, eastern direction, eastern breaths, southern breath, western breath. So it's saying eastern direction, eastern breath, southern direction, southern breath, western direction, western breath, upper direction, upper breath, lower direction, lower breath. Quarters are all breaths. He is indestructible, unattached, unfettered, does not suffer, is not injured. Yanaka, you have reached fearlessness. Yanaka said, may fearlessness come unto you, Yanavalkya. I am at your service. So he's talking about the spirit. It's in all things, it's unfettered, unattached, it's indestructible and unknowable and many other things. Okay. Third Brahman, the light of man is the self. Yajnavalkya did not wish to say anything, because what Yajnavalkya is trying to say is not just to espouse all his knowledge unto the king, Janaka, who keeps asking questions, but asking questions to absorb things in the mind intellectually. But Janaka asked him another question, and continued to ask questions. What light does a person here have? Now, I don't know if this is a story of something that actually happened, or whether this is a story wrapped around perception to therefore articulate it through this story, or whether the story is a reality and Yajnavalkya did have a conversation with a king called Janaka. This we cannot know. But either way, this is how it's portrayed. What light does a person here have? What serves as the light of man? He has, and Yajnavalkya goes on to say, he has the light of the sun. The sun indeed, as the light, one sits, moves about, does one's work and returns. One's work is actions, words, thoughts and intentions and activities within the material and non-material spiritual space of activities, and returns. This is talking about returns from sleep. So when we're actually asleep, not sleep in the Vedic text means one who is receiving ascent. Sleep in the Gnostic text is one who is the opposite of receiving ascent. But sleep in this term is also when we actually physically sleeping, going to sleep at night, and we return into the waking space afterwards. Okay, when the sun has set, moon has set, what light does a person here have? The fire, for with the fire indeed as the light. And he goes on, when the sun has set, moon has set, fire has gone out, speech is the light. What does one have? And Yajnavalkya says, speech is then the light. Even when one's own hand is not discerned, when speech is uttered, one goes towards it. So he goes on to say, when the sun has set, moon's set, fire gone out, speech has stopped, what does one have? And Yajnavalkya says, it's the self in his light, for with the self indeed as the light. So it goes through different layers of expression and ultimately ends up with the spiritual light being the thing that is always remaining when everything else is at rest. This self is present, this self, the infinite spirit in other words, is present in all states of waking, dream and sleep. It's the thing that never rests. It's the thing that is always animating us. And what this whole chapter is talking about, when we're asleep, other senses are not active. So what keeps us animated? What keeps us alive? What keeps us attached? What keeps us active? What keeps us aware? Is the infinite spirit. That's what this entire conversation is leading towards. It is a light different from one's body and organs, and illumines them through it is itself, not illumined by anything else. It's talking about the infinite spirit within. It isn't illumined by anything else because it is the grace of God and light of source, and it's what animates the body. It's what gives it the I, the self content. The soul part of us, people say, lost their souls. This is the energetic, the auric part of ourselves. The mind consciousness part of ourselves. We also have a physical side, which is instinctive. There's experiments where dead animals be given electrical current, and it still responds to stimuli. Its eyes will still flitter if you put something towards it. This is the physical, instinctive stimuli. Then between that is our conscious, our energy self. Okay, and this is what could be the soul part of us. We can sell our souls to dark things. We could never sell our infinite spirit, because that is always of light. We can suppress it and cast our soul towards the opposite actions, words, thoughts of dark intention. Therefore, the meaning of selling one's soul. We can never sell a spirit. The infinite self is divine. It's always divine, can never be anything else. It can be suppressed or it can be elevated and brought forward. It can be suppressed and pushed down. It depends on choice that we make to express our energy cells, our auric cells, our chakra cells by actions, words, thoughts and intentions and free will, creating karma and tendencies and so on and so forth that makes us move forward and incarnational life and so forth and so on. This goes on to say this, by the way. Okay, the different states of the self. Which is the self? This is again a conversation continuing Yajnavalkya and Janaka. It's the person who consists of knowledge among the senses, the light within the heart. He remaining the same, wanders along the two worlds, seeming to think, seeming to move about. He, on becoming asleep, dream condition, transcends this world and the forms of death. So what this is talking about is that when we're asleep, we are moving between the physical waking world, and we're moving also towards the world of light and grace, the etheric world. And there we can see and experience within our dream state of our spirit state, our etheric state, our subtle body state, evil and goodness. We understand all things in that state. And so that's what it says. It wanders along between the two worlds. These are the two worlds it is referring to. Okay, it's seeming to think. So this is a narrative from the author. Seeming to think is saying it's not really thinking, but only witnessing the acts of thought. So this is our energetic state. We are witnessing things, acts of thought, energetic vibration to things that we think of in that state. Seeming to move about. Thought and action do not belong to the real nature of self. Universal self appears limited on account of the conjuncture of the self. With buddhi or understanding, in the state of liberation, the connection with the understanding terminates. S, which is the Supreme Self, argues that the self is so called because we fail to discriminate its association with the limiting adjunct. Limiting adjunct is matter, the body. Evils is the source of good and evil, body and organs. This is effectively saying thought and action do not belong to the real nature of the self. They belong to our conscious self, our energy, our subtle body, if you like, our physical external expression. Actions, word, thoughts are belonging to that. But the spirit wears the clothes of those tendencies and karmic vibrations when we enter and exit these lifetimes in this universe. This is our Akashic record, our Akashic clothing. The universal self appears limited on account of the conjunction of the self with buddhi or understanding. Okay, this person, when he is born and obtains a body, becomes connected with evil. So in other words, drops into bodies like the fall of man, in other words, also associated with that. When he departs on dying, he leaves all evils behind. So to speak, we take our tendencies and karma with us, and forming personality. Personality does not die at all, it stays with us. There are just two states of this person: the state of being in this world and the state of being in the outer world. Now this is again in sleep state. There is an intermediate third state, being in sleep and dream. This is the being in sleep and dream. So this is this intermediate state, one sees both these states. This is sleeping state. So going back to this, there are two states of being, of physical and of infinite spirit, and the intermediate state being the sleep state, where you see both, or where you are able to interact with both. Being in this world, in the other world, and in the other world, one sees both the evils of this world and the joys of the other world. When he goes to sleep, he takes along the material of this all-embracing world, himself tears apart, himself build it up. Sleep and dream state, by his own brightness, by his own light, in that state the person becomes self-illumined. This is just talking about, I think for me, it's we can either tear apart that which what we see in our intermediate state is akin to our vibration waking state. We can build that up or tear it apart and recreate by our own brightness, i.e. our own knowledge, our own awareness, and by this light we can be self-illumined. Okay, he provides himself with whatever knowledge, work and previous experience he may have for the attainment for the next world. This is a footnote again from the author. What does this mean? This is referring to for the next world. This is not just the infinite world, this is talking about the next incarnation. So whatever knowledge, whatever previous experience and works we have performed today, or in the now, will be forming what it is we will drift towards, or the group we will drift towards within our infinite spirit, infinite manifestation, infinite reality, and then also what our clothing will be for the incarnative life that we will be choosing for ourselves next. There are no chariots, animals, roads, joys, pleasures, delights, tanks, rivers. He indeed is the great agent or maker or creator. This is talking about the self. Having struck down in sleep what belongs to the body is another question. It looks down on the sleeping senses. Taken to himself light, he goes again to his place. The golden person, the lonely swan. The lonely swan is regarded as the one infinite spirit. So this is talking about when he's in sleep, he looks upon his body and the sleeping senses, and is co-joined back to the golden person, which is the infinite spirit, the light, golden light. Okay, another footnote goes, while one is in the state of dream, the self makes the body to sleep, but the self remains awake and notices the impressions of the deeds that have been left upon the mind. So it's aware of itself always. It's aware of our karmic footprint, our energetic state, the footprint we're leaving in the Akasha upon the universe itself. By assuring himself with the consciousness of the self's organs, the self causes the body to wake. So this is basically saying we wake up when the infinite spirit decides to reignite the organs into active state. The golden person, the spiritual, the light, that is pure intelligence, the infinite spirit. Sleep is the indispensable condition. In that state, the individual is at one with the divine ground of all being. The lonely swan, waking in dream states, he moves alone. That I am, Hamsa, a swan, the symbol of the spirit of the universe. The swan is in this state, in this particular discourse, regarded as the infinite spirit, the one that sits alone, the golden person, or the Hamsa. Okay, and from the text itself, one should not wake him, the sleeping person, to cure if he does not get back to his body. So he's saying, don't wake up a person who's asleep, because if you do, he won't get back into the body, because it is the work of the spirit to wake the individual up, which again is dogma of the time, or thinking of the time. Others state that the state of sleep is just his waking state for whatever object he sees when awake. For in the dream state, the person is self-illumined. The dream state, we're connected to spirit, so we become self-illumined. So it just goes on with the same narrative here. Okay, and this is another footnote. Himself no one ever sees. Everyone is aware of the experiences, but no one sees the experiencer. So experiences is something we have in the material. The experiencer is the infinite spirit. We don't see the infinite spirit. Regret is expressed that the self, so near to us, is yet unperceived by us. This is the infinite spirit. It's always within us. It's received. It's constantly aware of it. If we are moving into a spiritual journey, of course, many don't even believe the spirit exists because they are not in the spiritual journey and therefore not perceiving it at all. But it's unperceived to us, yet it's so near. In dreams, the senses cease to function, so only the light inherent in the self is active in the dream state. Again, this is providing further explanation for what the texts so far that we've read mean. Okay, and in the text, having tasted enjoyment in this state of deep sleep, the spirit roams around, seeing good and evil, he returns again and into the waking state. Whenever he sees in that state, whatever he sees in that state, he is not followed, affected, not attached to anything. And so it's a deep sleep is the state of highest serenity. Well, I would say that, I suppose, from a physical perspective, from a living in bodies perspective, we all would love to have really deep, silent, peaceful sleeps where knowing comes to us. It's difficult in this day and age. I struggle myself having very deep, serene sleeps. I only hope to try. Okay, and from the text, after tasted enjoyment in this state of dream, he returns again as he came to the place from which he started to the state of waking. So in other words, we woke up. He is not followed, he is not followed or affected. So in other words, whatever is experienced within the dream state doesn't come through into the waking. Having had enjoyment in this state of waking, he returns back to sleep, which he started the state of dream of deep sleep. The self is unaffected in all the three states of waking, dream, and sleep. Of course, it's not. Okay, the self is different from the body and the organs. This is another note. In the waking state, it appears through ignorance as connected. In a waking state, it appears through ignorance as connected with attachments and deaths. In the dream state, as connected with desire but free from the forms of death. In the state of deep sleep, it is perfectly serene and unmatched. It's a different state of our connection to ourself, our divine I. The sense of this passage is that the self is by nature eternal, free, enlightened, and pure, absolute, supreme, which is what the S apostrophe stands for. Even as a large fish moves from one bank of a river to another, so does the self move between dreaming and waking. So this entire passage, last couple of slides, few slides have been around our waking state, our sleep state, and our deep dreaming state, and returning from it. Okay, the self in deep sleep, it continues. A person hastens to the state of self where he desires no desires and sees no dream. In him, these channels called hita, which are as fine as a hair divided 1,000-fold. Now when he feels as if he were being killed, being overpowered, he thinks, imagines through ignorance whatever fear he has seen, experienced in the waking state. But when he thinks that he is a god, as it were, that he is a king, as it were, that I am all this, that is the highest Brahman. This effectively saying that we have no desire or material attachment when we're in the state of pure divine self, which in this case is talking about deep sleep. When we're not in deep sleep, then we attach ourselves to the matter side of us, the ignorant side of us, where we do start feeling and experiencing and interacting with fear or the dualities of existence. And that's what this is saying. But when we start understanding that we are a divine I, a lowercase g, God, which I don't really like that term associated with anything but source, when we understand that we are our divine I, then that is the highest state of being in this world. And a note, the subtle body is said to be in these channels. The two selves unite in the heart, where when their union takes place, self-consciousness disappears, as well as distinction between the outer and inner world, the highest reality, the all-consciousness free from fear and grief is reached. This is where, again, reaching to the infinite spirit. This is talking about the deep sleep. It's talking about where the subtle body reunites with our internal infinite body, infinite self, and so forth. Really, the journey is just to your infinite self. These are just really, for me, intellectual separations. You know, the only journey we have is to our infinite spirit, and just think of that only, return to grace. Everything else is really attachment, or rather distraction. Everything else is just moving you away from. It's just intellectual avenue one can go through. There's many intellectual archetypes and metaphors and idols and demigods and deities and so forth we can go down the rabbit hole on. But ultimately, just stay on the path towards source, because all these other things will be understood along the way. We don't need to go down those paths individually because they're not needed, because ultimately they're not real. They're creations of ourselves, or the creations of our mind to understand and intellectualize that which cannot be known. And that is what this is my teaching completely, is ignore these other things. Move towards source, and these other things will be implicit in your knowing along that passage. Okay, in his form, free from craving, free from evils, free from fear, which is the infinite form, the person, when in the embrace of the intelligent self, knows nothing without or within. His desire is fulfilled. The self is his own only desire, which is true. Moving towards understanding and integration with the true I is all we actually seek. It talks about sex as one of the passages in here were about intercourse. Okay, but I just took the footnote here because I thought it interesting to discuss. It talks about sex intercourse. We have an act of pure delight which is not mere physical satisfaction, but a psycho-spiritual communion. In the right context, when two people are truly loving each other and joining in that communion. Rich, deep fulfillment of love between a man and a woman. Many mystics employ this as a symbol of divine communion. So you see a lot of the sexual imagery in a lot of the some Vedic pictures, graphics, text. And this is talking not just about the. It's not talking about the physical act. It's talking about it's referring also to the spiritual psycho-communion, the love communion between a man and a woman, which is an expression of grace itself, which is what they're talking about. In Vaisnava, which is the name for a devotee of Vishnu literature, the soul pining for union with God is said to be the bride, and the divine love which sanctifies, purifies, and elevates the soul to itself is said to be the bridegroom. So they talk about the male and the female in aspects, and so does the Gnostic text. It does the same thing. It narrates it the same way, uses the same metaphors. And God, for some Sufis, which is the Islamic mystic sect, is the eternal feminine. Lover is God, and the loved one sought is the human soul invited to unite with God. Again, that's true. Okay, and some text from the text itself. There in the state, a father is not a father, worlds are not the worlds, gods are not the gods. He is not affected by good, he is not followed by evil, for then he is passed beyond all the sorrows of the heart. So this is talking about when you reach the state of infiniteness, you are just unattached from all the physical manifestations of things, demigods, gods, metaphors, archetypes, whatever it may be, idols, deities, rabbis, priests and popes, and worlds, the obsession with worlds, or domination of worlds, and so forth. You become beyond, you transcend beyond those material sorrows that many continue to suffer. And he does to go on to say in a different passage, murderer of a noble Brahmin. Now this can offend some people, but so be it. It refers to one who kills an embryo, one who produces an abortion. So this is, I think this was a footnote in this, and it's an interpretation of it. You can never kill a spirit. Whatever one thinks about the right for abortion or not abortion, that's up to you. We all have free will. We can determine whatever we wish, and we hold the responsibility and accountability for those actions, words, thoughts and intentions. It's not for me to tell you what's right and wrong. But the murderer of noble Brahmin, you can never kill the infinite spirit. This is talking about the spirit to enter life is terminated, so the spirit can never enter life. So this is why it's talking the murderer of a noble Brahmin. Brahman being the spiritual consciousness of the Absolute. Okay, where there in the state of deep sleep, he does not see. Though he does not see, for there is no cessation of the seeing of a seer. Even in the state of deep sleep, when the eye and other senses are at rest, the self is the seer. Of course, the self is always, the infinite eye is always there. The seer can never lose the character of seeing, which is the infinite eye. The self sees by its own light, like the sun, no object but he self that could be seen, the seer is. Again, it's just talking about the seer being the infinite light is always present. This entire section was about that. When they're in the state of deep sleep, he does not smell. Though he does not smell, for there is no cessation of the smelling of the smeller. He does not taste, for there is no cessation of the tasting of the taster. Because of the imperishability of the taster, this is talking about the infinite I, the self. He does not speak, for there is no cessation. For he does not speak, there is no cessation of the speaking of the speaker. It goes on in the same manner. Because of the imperishability of the speaker, he does not hear. Though he does not hear, for there is no cessation of the hearing of the hearer. He does not think. There is no cessation of the thinking of the thinker, because of the imperishability of the thinker. He does not touch, no sensation of the touching of the toucher, because of the imperishability of the toucher. He does not know, no sensation of knowing of the knower, imperishability of the knower. In other words, it's saying that the infinite spirit never dies. There is no end to anything because we are the infinite I. There is no cessation to any expression in this life or any other life, in this form or any other form, in every metaphor or archetype or whatever expression of the cosmos, of the earth, of the body we wish to express, to describe the infiniteness of the all. There's complete imperishability, for there is no cessation, because the infinite spirit always exists, whether you're waking, sleep, or in deep sleep. Okay, he does not see or smell or taste or speak or hear or think or touch or know, for there is nothing separate from him. This is the infinite I. For he is one with seeing, smelling, tasting, speaking, hearing, touching, and knowing. We just talked about that. This is just an extension of the previous passage. He becomes transparent like water. The seer without duality is the world of Brahman, which is the absolute supreme consciousness, the infinite I, the divine infinite spirit. This is his highest goal, highest treasure, highest world, highest bliss. On a particle of this very bliss, other creatures live. Absolutely. It's talking about the infinite spirit animates everything. It is the bliss, and how other creatures, everything is animated, animate or inanimate, has an infinite spirit which animates the inanimate or the animate. And it talks about one particle. For me, this means our infinite spirit is not in ourselves as a whole. It's a fractal of it. We are connected to our divine whole. Our spirit is always in the essence of grace, because it came from grace. So our golden thread is always attached to our divine grace. We are what we call emitting a fractal of our divine footprint within ourselves. The infinite spirit is so vast and so enormous and so all-encompassing, because it is a mirror of the all. It cannot be suppressed in this body. It cannot be held in a body. Our golden thread is always integrated with the divine. We are expressing ourselves into this body, in this realm. We never leave the divine. The divine is the connection that we always have. Now, can we suppress the fractal expression of light within us so that we don't sense it anymore? Of course we can, through our soul self and through our energy and mind and matter self, and we can live that way. But our golden thread, that particle, is the particle that is attached to the infinite self, which is always in the realm of grace. If one is healthy in body, wealthy, a lord, human bliss multiplied, this goes on to say how what we experience is only a fraction of what the understanding of the true I is, and you'll see how this passage progresses. Okay, if one is healthy in body, wealthy, a lord, human bliss multiplied 100 times and make one unit of bliss of the fathers who have won their world. There was those who have released themselves from the cycle of rebirth, in other words, moksha. The fathers of the world, the Gandharva word, which is the deities. The bliss of the Gandharvas world multiplied 100 times makes a unit of the bliss of the gods by action. You multiply them by 100 times is one unit of the bliss of the gods by birth. One who is versed in the Vedas, who is not overcome by desire, is multiplied 100 times is one unit of the world of Prajapati, which is the Lord of creation and the protection. Multiplied that by 100 times is one unit in the world of Hiranyagarbha, which is the creation of the universe. Remember those levels that we discussed at the very beginning. and the manifestation of the cosmos, is versed in Vedas without sin and not overcome by desire. The highest bliss is the world of Brahman, so beyond that, 100 times multiplied, is the world of Brahman. So these are the multiplication layers of ascent through all these passages, and then obviously the world of Brahman is the supreme consciousness, which actually is the only thing that exists. You can ignore all the other levels down here and just move silently towards that, because you'll experience all of the others implicitly without trying. These will all become understood. They're not really physical realities. They are energetic states of frequency in which we move towards the highest frequency, which is that of moksha in this physical material realm. Those who live within the binds of ignorance experience but a small portion of infinite bliss. This is a footnote which explains the self-explanatory. Okay, the self at death. Just as a heavily loaded cart moves creaking, even so the self in the body, mounted by the self of intelligence. One is breathing with difficulty. So this is talking about when we're about to die, we breathe with difficulty. And the creaking body, which the body is mounted by the self, i.e. animated by the divine I. The subtle body which moves between this and the next world, as between the waking and the dream states. When this body gets to thinness, this is talking about moving towards death, the ultimate death of the physical body. Through old age or disease, just as a mango or a fig, the tree releases itself from its bond, it falls from the tree. A person frees himself from these limbs and returns again as he came to the place from which he started back to a new life. Let's talk about incarnation. The dying man separates himself from his gross body. They always talk the material self as being gross, because it's matter, the ignorant matter space. He goes back to his new abode. The subjection of the body to old age and disease is mentioned to induce the spirit of renunciation. So in other words, if we don't look after the body to a sufficient state, it's saying the spirit then renunciates it, in other words, releases it, and then we die. Ultimately, death is can come from many different actions. Okay, it's all free will. We have lots of free will in this world, but the spirit, which is our divine I, and we're always connected to it, just leaves because it is always us. We decide to leave. We don't do it through consciousness. We do it in a state of true connection to the spirit. We know that we're about to go, and then we just go immediately. But how? The care of the body is up to us. We can neglect it. We can shorten our longevity because of neglect through actions of our own, but also free will actions of another, which is an unintended consequence that we may suffer from an action of another. And that doesn't mean that it was always intended. This could also shorten a life if someone just decides in a split second that they were going to do something. Some people say, well, everything's intended, everything's written. Well, not so, because free will is always there. Life can be ended by another's action, but not through your own volition. No, because it was karmically intended, but this can also be the case. Okay, just as for a king who is coming, a policeman or chariot drivers, the village wait for him with food. Even so for him who knows this, all beings wait for him, saying, here comes Brahman, here he approaches. All the breaths or senses gather round the self at the end when one is breathing with difficulty. So this is talking about that we wait at the passage of death. We are waiting for the divine spirit to express itself and then leave the body. This is what this thing is talking about. Okay, the fourth Brahman. The soul of the unleashed after death. When this self gets to weakness, confusedness, takes to himself those particles of light and descends into the heart. Person in the eye turns away. So it's talking about when we are ready for this, we unleash, we go into the heart space. The spirit is in the heart space. The person in the eye turns away. He becomes non-knowing of forms. In other words, we are released, and we are released into after death. He is becoming one. He does not see, he does not taste, he does not hear, he does not think, he does not touch. The point of his heart becomes lighted up, and by that light the self departs either through the eye or through the head or through other apertures of the body. So it says the infinite spirit leaves us. It doesn't go through all these many things. It just leaves us through this space. And life departs after him. The animation of our material matter being stops. He becomes one with the intelligence, i.e. integrated back to grace. Because we are always integrated back to grace, we just become re-aware of it. That's what happens. What intelligence departs with him, his knowledge and his work take a hold of him, also his past experience. This is talking about karma and tendencies. This is talking about our clothes, our akashic clothing that goes with us. The individual is born according to the measure of his understanding. Absolutely, this is talking about the state of frequency we will come back to, until we've reached a state of moksha, which is release from rebirth, which is the ascent from matter space. Khalidza says, which is another seer, when a being who is happy becomes conscious of an ardent longing when he sees beautiful objects or hears sweet sounds, remembers with his mind the friendships of former lives firmly rooted in his heart. So what this is talking about is when the person is following the path of ardent longing, which is basically the passion to go back into his divine self, you start to become aware of your incarnative lives. You start to understand them. You may even become aware of them, but they become apparent to you because they're always within your higher self. They can be accessed here, and this is talking about that they can be accessed through you, through ourselves, once we ascend to a certain state of being. Okay, and from the text itself, just as a leech came to the end of a blade of grass, another approach to another blade draws itself together towards it. So in other words, the blade moves to another blade, the leech moves to another blade of grass. So does this self. He throws away the body and approaches to another body itself together. So in other words, we move to another body, incarnation. Transition to another body, same as a goldsmith, another metaphor, or analogy rather, has a piece of gold and turns it into another more beautiful shape. So does the self, like that of the fathers or of the Gadvas, which are these spiritual beings, or of the gods or the Prajapati, the creative force, of Brahman or of other beings. Okay, remember the thing that he talks about beautiful shape, because it's going to come on to something which I disagree with. And I think it may be coming on to it now. Here we go. So the text seems to suggest this. Beauty of form indicates beauty of the soul. No, it does not. And I'll explain this when I read this explanation here. We cannot have beauty of form when an evil nature. This is also incorrect. Those of good form do not behave in evil ways, which is absolutely incorrect. Beauty is a symbol of the divine. So in the Vedas, it seems to suggest that if something's beautiful, if something's the image of something's beautiful, it cannot be evil. When we incarnate we have more beauty in face or body, then we are of higher vibration. This is not reality. Form, or whatever form we have, does not indicate your state of being. It's the body that you've chosen, the face that you've chosen, the family that you've chosen, the country that you've chosen, that is going to service the intention for the lifetime. Not because of your beautiful face. There are many people with beautiful faces who are the most evil in the world. This occurs all the time. It doesn't mean that you are if you are of good physical features that you cannot commit evil ways. In fact, this is totally untrue. So there is a misunderstanding here on the Vedas, which I always say: discern everything you read in Scripture. Everything. Just because it's written in the Vedas doesn't mean it's true. It has to be understood from its time it was written and the reality of what we understand now, because we have expanded further in spiritual awareness. Understanding this passage is not true, because it has a paragraph in here which does actually say this. And I completely and utterly disagree with it. But remember, you can come into this life. I'm going to give an example, which is, and some of you may relate to, some of you may not. Tony Blair was a Prime Minister in England. Look at the guy before he became Prime Minister. He's young, energetic, fairly decent looking guy, entered politics, or was manoeuvred into it. Depends how you want to think about that. And then met who he met and associated with during his prime ministerial years, and then went into those passages and dark corridors afterwards. You look at Tony Blair today and look at his picture before he entered any politics at all. His face was young, his eyes had light. Look at him today. His face is drawn and wrinkled, full of corruption. His eyes are dark and soulless. He sold himself a long time ago to more darker passages. His face is an expression, his eyes are an expression of where he's directed his being towards. So, what this could be interpreted is that if you are of tendency of dark, your being will reflect it. No matter what you try to do to elongate your life, what practices, sacrifice and aberrations and abominations that you practice and do, your face will always, your eyes will always, your body will always express the darkness and the passage of darkness you've chosen because of the frequency that it holds. It will draw into you and it will express and make your external self within and without dark. He is a perfect expression in my life experience that I can give you. There are many others. George Soros is another one. Man, just look at them all. Those who wish to govern and rule the world. Look at them. How they decrepitness that they become even before old age. And this is because of the drop of light. They have, like I was saying before, they've decided to suppress the infinite light and decide that their soul will go towards the 180 degrees away from grace, towards dark passages, very, very dark passages of actions, words, thoughts and intentions, because that's where they've decided through free will and governance of their own tendencies back there. Their incarnational cycles will bring them back into this vibration, into the same vibration they left, with the same souls of vibration in which they're with today, to challenge them to move away from that. Many will keep repeating those cycles over and over again, just like Jimmy Savile will, again from the UK, which is close to my experience. That obnoxious and abhorrent human being will come back and be around the same abhorrence that he was with in the lifetime that he left. This I will guarantee you. Okay, we digress and we'll move forward. Okay, I seem to have lost a connection, it seems, to... I hope this is still running on YouTube and Facebook, but I'll check. Seem to have lost one connection. Okay, that self is indeed Brahman, consisting of the understanding, mind, light, sight, hearing, earth, water, air, ether, light. No light, has no desire, is no anger, has no righteousness, is absence of all these things. This is what is meant by saying it consists of all of this. So remember it says this and that. It's saying what is perceived, what we perceive within our meditative state and our senses, and what is inferred, and what is inferred and real. As one acts, one behaves, one does what does he become. In other words, we hold action, words, thoughts and intentions. The doer of good becomes good, the doer of bad becomes bad action. A person consists of desires. As is his desire, so is his will. It's true. Deed he does, that he attains. This is talking about karma, tendencies, reincarnation cycle. Okay. The object to which the mind is attached, the subtle self goes together with the deed. That's right. Our intention and thought directs our actions and words in this life. Everything is intention and thought. This intention actually is the base of all karma. You can never drive karma to somebody else. Your intention, no matter what its expression, is associated with karma. Always. Whatever works he did in this world, he comes again from that world. As we said, you hold it in your Akashic clothing. To this world for fresh work. In other words, you reunite with new intention to resolve tendency. Karma is a build of tendency. Mark a man who does not desire, he who is without desire, who desire is satisfied, whose desire is the self. His breaths do not depart. Being Brahman, he goes to Brahman, i.e. the Absolute. And this is a footnote. The subtle body is called mind because mind is the chief factor of the subtle body, which is the energy body, in other words. I questioned this. The mind is not the subtle body. The mind is always apparent in all aspects of ourself, our conscious, our subtle body, and also the expressions of our infinite self as well, because it changes mind always. So I wouldn't say this is exactly true. He who desires continues subject to rebirth. Absolutely. Well, desire for the attachment of things in the matter realm, that is. The man freed from desires realizes Brahman even here. One need not wait for the desire for the death of the body. This is true. Freedom is a cessation of ignorance. So then we can also release ourselves from incarnation of life, which is moksha. We don't need to wait for death to do this. We do this in our life experience, from the release and the cessation of ignorance to the absorption of knowing and pure intelligence, which comes from our divine infinite self. Actually, we have to allow it to reveal itself to us, to become the light and the preceding factor of our lives. This is what comes as knowing. Whom desire is stifled suffers no rebirth. Whom desire is stilled suffers no rebirth. When all the desires that dwell in the heart are cast away, then does the mortal become immortal and attains Brahman, is light indeed. Of course. Okay, and again, it's another there's many footnotes in this. This particular chapter had many footnotes. The other ones that we went through didn't have many at all. When we identify us, didn't have as many, sorry. It did have some. When we identify ourselves with the body under the influence of desires and past work, we are embodied and mortal. When we become disembodied, we become immortal. Of course, we are no longer committed to embodiment, only when embodied and in moksha. Okay, and then from the text, the narrow ancient path which stretches far away, knows of Brahman go up to the heavenly world after the body of the fall of this body and being freed. The ancient path that stretches far away, what is this talking about? This is talking about after we go through that path. This is the journey of ascent, the spiritual path, the ascetic path, the path of the seer, the path of the knower, the path of meditative contemplation. This is a long, narrow path that stretches far away. It's a very difficult path to lead. It will always start with yourself, it will end with yourself, and many different experiences on the way that you need for yourself, for this attainment of knowing, to release moksha. Is a long, long path. And the footnotes is the Buddha speaks of the ancient way, the wayfarer bound for home, in other words, the traveller, the spiritual traveller, from which there is no coming back again. This is only when we achieve moksha. Rumi states, which is another philosopher, a spiritual ascetic, attributes to Jesus, which is Christ's logos, the word. For the true believers, I become a bridge across the river. Absolutely. Everything is a bridge across the river, or rather a stone. As I said, the path stretches far away. It started with us at birth, it ends with us at death. In between are many stones on the river that we can traverse. The Christ consciousness and the Logos is one stone. The Buddhic is another stone. The Krishna is another stone. The Jain is another stone. The the Judaic is another stone. The Sufi, the Upanisads, the mysticism there, New Age, whatever you want to call, are stones. Traverse them all, but you will end up on the largest one just before you step onto the shore at the other end. That is your own. That is of you with yourself. Okay. Okay, and another one goes Tattariya, who is another ascetic. Tattariya Brahmana, which is a Vedic script. He who makes the self Atman, the Atman is the self. His wayfinder is no longer stained by evil action. His view that spiritual wisdom and practical activity are incompatible. Well, that view is not quite right. Our practical activity, action, words, thoughts, and intentions are a passage to spiritual wisdom as well, and understanding it. So it's not just sitting in a cave having contemplative action, it is also physical action. The strongest spiritual ascent is attained when in the realm of brutal duality. It is not attained when sitting in a cave, isolating from brutal duality. Real spiritual strength and passage, if you can do it here and not hiding in a forest, this is the strongest one. I will take a person who says he's ascending and ascended in a forest, put them in the duality of the world and ask them to live in it, and I will see how strong that ascension actually is, and the constant of it. The gods, and this is from the text, the gods consider him to be a knower of Brahman, who has no desires, who undertakes no work, and does not bow to others or praise anyone, remains unchanged, whose work is exhausted. In other words, physical action, words, thoughts, the need for physical matter experience. For a knower of Brahman, there is no wealth comparable to the sense of oneness, integrity, and withdrawal from all activities. In other words, release from rebirth. Okay, I think I just missed a page there. Excuse me. Okay. The narrow ancient path which stretches far away, knowers of Brahman go up to the heavenly world after the fall of his body, being freed even while living. Into blind darkness enter they who worship ignorance, again the self-explanatory, then that they that delight in knowledge, to them after death go those people who have not knowledge, who have not awakened. What craving can be left in him that he should take himself to another body full of suffering to satisfy it? It's good expression. It's saying that it's a sadness when there is such a craving that it demands another life to satisfy it. And this is these ascetics, these seers, these beings who went into the forest see this as a hell. For me, this is an expression of hell. Having such craving and desire for that which exists in the matter realm, that which is in the matter realm, draws you back into earth repeated times, is actually a hell. It's a hell for the infinite spirit, is it not? Through our true eye, to keep returning here. That is the nature of hell for me. Okay, we go into whoever has found and has awakened to self, that has entered into this perilous, inaccessible place, the body, he is the maker of the universe. If not, we would be ignorant. We would be ignorant. Create is the destruction. Those who know this become immortal, while others go only to sorrow. And if one clearly beholds him as the self, as a god, uppercase G, as the Lord of what has been and what will be, he does not shrink away from him. In other words, this one who understands and beholds that there is a great I and an absolute all, which there is. One should not make any mistake that there is an all, a divine source and Godhead. This does exist. That in which 5 groups of 5 and space are established. Knowing that immortal Brahman, I am immortal. So what are the 5 groups of 5? This is talking about the spiritual ascetic beings. These are Gadharvas, the fathers, the gods, the demons, and the titans. Various archetypes. In it there is no diversity. He goes from death to death, who sees in it as it were diversity. The mind purified by the knowledge of the supreme truth and the instructions, if the teacher directly realizes. Let a wise Brahmana, after knowing him alone, practice the means of wisdom. Let him not reflect on many words, for that is mere weariness of speech. You know what we're talking about, diversity. It's saying there is only one target. There is only one end. There are not diverse expressions of that. These are the things that we create. The diversity of archetype, metaphor, rabbi, priest, post, idol, deities, so on and so forth. The diversity with that we have created for ourselves in the spiritual expression of what we understand, there is actually not real diversity. There's just the one and our divine I, which is the one. This is all that really exists. Everything else, the diversity that we see or that we have created, is something we must transcend away from. Okay, and it says duality is essential for knowing, as the self is one. It is not an object of demonstration. Well, this is true. What is this saying? Duality is essential for knowledge. This is a footnote. If we didn't have duality, which is something we've created, by the way, duality was an expression of all possibility, of all probability, of free will, of ego. We created duality, and its brutalness of duality, the brutal power of it, is a manifestation of life in the millennia of eternal expression, have created this brutal duality in our universe and also upon this earth. Without that duality, it doesn't force us to seek further knowledge. It doesn't force us to seek divine grace. It doesn't mean that we needed it, but it exists, and because of existence, it is pushing us to seek greater knowledge, because the duality cannot obviously be it, because we feel that there must be more than this, beyond this duality. Okay, he is the great unborn self. This is what Yanavalkya is continuing to say. A knowledge among the senses, space within the heart. Space within the heart lies the controller of the all, which is the spirit, the ruler of all, the bridge that serves as the boundary to keep the different worlds apart. The Brahmanas seek to know the study by the Vedas. So this is the ascetics seek to study the Vedas. They give sacrifices, gives penance, they fast, to become an ascetic on the ancient path, having risen above the desire for sons, wealth, and worlds. This self is that which has been described as not this or not that. Remember, what is perceived and what is inferred, and in other words concluded upon through study, through expression, through contemplation. So what that comes to us, and then what we conclude through meditative practice, is what is perceived and what is inferred, which is this and which is that. This eternal greatness of the knower of Brahman is not increased by work or diminished. He who knows it as such, having become calm, self-controlled, withdrawn, patient by work or diminished. He who knows it as such, having become calm, self-controlled, withdrawn, patient, and collected, sees, overcomes all evil, is a knower of Brahman. And then this is the end of the conversation with the Yanaka. He says, Yanaka, you have attained all this knowledge. This is the great unborn self, the food and the giver of wealth, which is wisdom, knowledge, and assent. And Yanavalkya then, after speaking to his wives about this as well, gives provision and then leaves into the forest for his own final passage. And that is the end of this chapter. Again, very convoluted, very difficult to understand at times. I apologize for that. It is just the nature of what this is. I would suggest that, again, become the second coming. Remember, it is you. It is always going to be you. Go through whatever passages you seek, you need to, whatever scripture, rabbi, priests, popes, and gurus, wherever it is, but do not stay with them, do not worship them. They are not for you to sit at the feet of. You sit at the feet of knowledge and your own divine eye always, which will guide you, and ask the divine grace, the Father, to always hold your hand and take you down this ancient path, the wayfarer path, which is long and stretches far beyond. And the spiritual is transformative. You must become this within yourself, not just have something as a self-righteous, virtuous act, and also when you just want something. And again, thank you for, I've got to put the passage back on here. Thank you again for listening to this video. I truly appreciate your time. Again, it's gone over an hour there. Some of this passage was very, very long, but listen to these in sections if you wish, if that what serves you. But contemplate on what I have said. Contemplate on what the passages have said. Contemplate what the footnotes are saying you. Contemplate these for yourself. But discern, absorb, knowing. Don't try to understand everything at once, because understanding will come through the passage, the long wayfaring path that we will all walk. We'll not know everything in the beginning, we'll not throw anything in the middle, we'll know everything at the very end, but it could take many incarnative lives to do so. It's just start the passage, because this passage will continue into your next life. If you continue the passage, the tendency will move forward with you. The cloth within the Akasha, remember we have our Akashic clothing, we pass through that within our spirit, passes through the Akashic clothing. We wear this clothing, and this is what starts our tendencies. We pick up the tendencies of the past, the actions, words, thoughts, intentions of the past, our karma of the past. All of this is that we're here to keep moving forward within that passage, and that what this is all. These chapters we've gone through are telling you all this. It's really that simple. It goes through a lot of extra additional narrative over and over again, but remember when it was written. This is how they explained things then. We do it much simpler because we understand things more, because we've had the luxury of being able to study these texts in our current time. Over then, they were creating these texts back then. They didn't have the luxury of studying these texts because they weren't in existence then. They created those texts, the Bible, the Gnostics text, the Vedas, the Brahmanic text, the religions of David, the Jain text, name it. They were created the Buddhic text. They were created then. We've had the luxury of studying them now, so we can't have the arrogance of saying that these things are meaningless. They are all meaningful. We just have to get past the excessive narrative that is within them. Okay, I want to say thank you for listening, and apologies for the length of this, but this is just how it is. The next one will be coming up shortly. I don't think it's as long. But I want to say thank you so much for listening to this. I will check the video and make sure I did lose connection on one of these streams, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but please let me know if it doesn't work, and please pass on your comments if these are helpful to you. I do appreciate your time. It is a blessing to me when I receive your comments and you tell me that it is useful to you. This is my path to ascension, is to do this for others. So I want to say God bless you all. Have a great day, have a great weekend, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, and take care of yourselves until next time. Thank you.